This week on the Destination Angler.
Occasionally in my sleep, I'll set the hook and wake my wife up because I've smacked her in the arm side of the head. Because,
so you're dream fishing too,
all day long. Or I'll just be saying set in my sleep.
In your sleep.
So,
that's hilarious. I was going to ask you like what you would be doing if you weren't a guide or an artist, but that's a really dumb question because there's nothing else you'd be doing. You'd be guiding and doing art. That's it.
I think so. I think that, I feel really fortunate that my two real passions in life I'm paying the bills with right now.
That was Walter Foster on his two passions in life, art and fly fishing. Welcome to the Destination Angler Podcast, the podcast for anglers who travel. And I'm your host, Steve Haig. We go right to the source, the local guides and experts, to build your knowledge of top fishing locations around North America. It's a big world out there. Now go and fish it.
I'm going away for a while, but I'll be back soon. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Hey anglers, welcome back to another episode of the Destination Angler, brought to you by Trout Routes, the #1 fishing app, helping you find new trout waters so you spend less time on the road and more time doing what you love, trout fishing. And by Anglers Coffee, perfecting the coffee experience for the fly fishing community and anglers everywhere with small batch coffee delivered to your doorstep. It's darn near perfect. And by Got Fishing, crafting world-class fly fishing adventures specially designed to your level of experience and budget. Coming up on the Destination Angler, our 100th episode with John McLean, son of Norman McLean, who shares the fascinating story behind the story of the book and the river that changed everything. A river runs through it, and the Blackfoot River. And be sure to backcast to catch the last episode of the Destination Angler on the San Juan River, which is just an incredible tailwater in northwestern New Mexico. Are you a big fan of the Destination Angler podcast? Well, get your gear on with the Destination Angler 100th episode t-shirt. You can pick one up by heading over to my website today. Hey, and remember to hit that subscribe button to catch all the Destination Angler episodes coming your way. And if you like the show, please spread the word and tell a buddy. And today our destination is the world-renowned Provo River in Utah with expert fly angler, guide, and artist Walter Foster, owner of City Trout Tales and Fine Fin Art. Only 20 minutes from Park City, the Provo is one of Utah's top trout destinations, and for good reason. Spanning 70 miles, you'll find great freestone fly fishing at the top and two tailwater sections in the middle and the lower that fish like totally different rivers. These are trophy trout waters known for big browns and rainbows that'll rip line like there's no tomorrow. As a kid, Walter cut his teeth on the small trout streams around his house in Vermont. He took a job folding women's sweaters, if you can believe it, in Orvis's original store, where he eventually moved to the fly fishing department, guiding clients on the Battenkill. Ski racing brought him west, and for the past 27 years, he's been guiding clients on Utah's most famous lakes and streams. Walter is also an accomplished artist, spending upwards of 100 hours on each painting, replicating his clients' lifetime catches on canvas. Today, Walter dials us into the Provo from top to bottom, gives us the lowdown on the hatch chart, his top fly picks, and other lakes and streams in the area, along with epic fish battles and 40 fish days on Pyramid Lake, known for producing 20-pound Lahontan Cutthroat Trout. Not kidding. Stick around to the end for a great Robert Redford story, who Walter met while waiting tables. So let's get into it. Walter, welcome to the show.
Oh, it's great to be here, Steve.
Man, it's great having you. Thanks for saying yes. I really appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely.
Man, I fished this Provo a couple times. I fished it a couple times in the 90s and then was out there in the early 2000s fishing it. And every time I've been to the Provo, man, I have had a great day. It is such a fantastic fishery.
It is.
But before we get into that, you and I were talking a couple weeks ago about Pyramid Lake, and you spent quite a bit of time up there. And I thought maybe we could just start there. Like, it sounds like an amazing place.
It is. It is. I started fishing it again about 4 or 5 years ago, and man, it is like no other fishery on the planet that I've ever fished. It's the potential to catch a cutthroat trout 20 pounds is definitely possible. And
oh my gosh,
when I fish it in the wintertime, they're keyed into like size 10 and 12 midges. which is kind of mind blowing.
Right. Well, 20 pounds. So what's the story with Pyramid Lake? Because it wasn't always like this, right?
No, it's a fascinating story. When I guided in the Truckee area back in 2002, 2003, the pilot peak strain of cutthroats were not in there. They had the summit strain, which some of them would get double digit size, but that strain of cutthroats historically were thought to be lost forever. And then like 10, 15 years ago, these biologists found this strain of cutthroat on the border of Utah and Nevada, and they couldn't quite figure out what it was, but the scientists finally figured out that this was the so-called extinct strain of Lahontan Cutthroat from Pyramid Lake. So they worked with the Paiute tribe, and they reintroduced this into their hatchery back, I think, in 2006. And so this experiment was started then, and lo and behold, we have these, what we thought were extinct cutthroats, getting into the 20, they say there's some 25 pounders now. And really in my lifetime, I never thought that I would ever experience these fish swimming in this. It's a fascinating place to fish.
Oh my gosh. And what kind of growth rates are these guys doing here?
Yeah, so I've talked to the fisheries biologist there, and what I've heard is these pilot peak strain of Lahantans can grow 5 to 7 pounds a year. So potentially a 4 or 5 year old fish can get into that 20-pound class. And I think where they really are able to put on that weight is for most of the year they're feeding on the tui chub. That's the native chub in that lake. And in the summertime, they're in deep water and they're foraging on these tui chubs. But come late fall, winter, spring, they cruise the shorelines and they turn into trout that want to key into little midges. So
really?
you got these little beadhead midges under a strike indicator, and all of a sudden that indicator goes down and you're like, oh my gosh, it could be a 20-pound fish, or you're stripping a little popcorn beetle or leech, and that line stops and the line peels out of your hands, and you don't know what you have until you see that thing shimmer in that lake. And it's a fascinating place. It's like fishing on Mars. There's no trees. There's all these wild rock formations, these tufa rock formations. It's got a really unique energy to it, and when the wind blows, you better have your casting skills down for sure.
So what's the story with the ladders I see out in the middle of the lake, like fishermen standing on these ladders? What's up with that?
Well, if a lot of fishermen that target these fish on the beaches, that water is 3 to 5 feet for sometimes 100 yards. So the ladder you can put on your shoulder. You can just hike it out to that area where that lake finally drops into that 7 to 10 feet of water, and that's where those fish are cruising. Is once that lake starts to transition from that 3 to 4 feet down to 7, 10 feet and deeper. And then the other thing the ladder does is it gets you out of the water. That water can be ice cold, and if you're out there chest deep, and if the wind picks up and the waves hit you, your day of fishing is done pretty quickly. So you plant your ladder, you get up there, you can cast just like being on the front of a boat, and you can see what's going on, and that's the purpose of it. And then there's a lot of areas of that shoreline that are rocky that drop into very deep water right away. So you can get up on a rock.
That's good too, then.
And you'll be in 10, 15 feet of water and ready to go.
Well, why not just get a boat?
Well, the boats are, and there are plenty of people who fish boats there, but I will tell you that that lake can go from calm as glass to 4 or 5 foot waves really quick.
Oh, really?
So a lot of people, with a ladder, if you see the, waves starting to build, you can pull the ladder and get back to shore. And I was actually out on the lake last year, and a few low profile boats were not too far offshore, and that wind picked up and those waves came in and capsized 3 of those boats 20 feet offshore.
Wow, no kidding.
So I think a lot of times it's a safety thing, just to be able to get back to shore really quick when you need to. Same thing with like Jurassic Lake in Argentina. I know that they don't use any boats out there because the wind and the waves can be really dangerous, especially on a smaller watercraft.
Where is Pyramid Lake for everybody?
Pyramid Lake is 30 minutes outside of Reno, Nevada. I believe it's a little bit north of Reno. So a lot of people fly into Reno, and of course, Reno has plenty of accommodations with casinos, hotels. There isn't a lot of places on the lake. There's Crosby's Lodge, and they have a few rooms. They get booked out pretty quickly. And then they have a number of campers that you can actually rent out that have barbecue grills, and you can just, bring what you need and you'll be close.
Right. Walter, what's a good day for you on Pyramid Lake?
Yeah, I mean, me and a couple of my buddies were out there in March, and we had a couple days where each of us hooked 30, 40 fish in a day.
Like what size?
Any fish situation is pretty epic.
Yeah, no, that's epic, but you're talking about some big fish here too, aren't you?
Yeah, you're talking, fish that are averaging 6, 7, 8 pounds, and many fish over 10 pounds.
Wow.
What we'd like to do is in the morning, we'll start off fishing the indicator rig with some midges, and then we'll transition into grabbing our ladders and going to the beaches and using like a intermediate or slow sinking line, stripping a little leech or what we call a pop beetle, which I think imitates some of the dragonfly nymphs that are in the lake. And so it's nice because you can mix it up between, looking at an indicator and then also casting and stripping and getting that nice pull. So, it's a good way to keep you in the game, just mixing it up between the nymphing and doing that type of technique.
Does your arm get tired hauling in all those huge fish all day long?
It really actually does.
Yeah, I'll bet it
really
does. That's amazing.
Yeah, I have a little bit of carpal tunnel, and that gets fired up after fishing there for
Wow, that's incredible. Well, there you go. It sounds like I needed to do a show on Pyramid Lake. So if there's any guys out there that want to be on the podcast, give me a shout.
Yeah, a couple of my buddies who work for Pyramid Fly Company, Cole and Trevor Herring, they're out there guiding all season, and they know that lake inside out, and I can coach.
There you go. Give them a call, folks. Cool. Let's come back to Utah here, which is why we're doing the podcast, right? Talking about the Provo in Utah. So Utah is this amazing state, right? You don't hear quite as much about it, like Colorado and Montana are also great states. You hear a lot about Wyoming, but Utah is incredible, right? So talk about Utah just as a state for fly fishing.
It's an amazing state. There's so much diversity. We have the Provo River, which has 3 different sections that run about 71, 72 miles. We have all these reservoirs, small streams, and other tailwaters within 40 minutes of Heber or Park City, where I'm based. So you can literally just wake up one day and fish the Provo, the next day fish the Weber, go up to Strawberry Reservoir and chase giant cutthroat, or get lost in the Uinta Mountains and chase brook trout and tiger trout. And so really kind of any type of fishing you want to do, you can do that within half an hour, 45 minutes from here.
Yeah, and like I felt like the Provo is unusually good fishing. I've done really well.
It can be, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what it's like. It's been a few years.
It's like any fishery. There's a lot of guides and a lot of anglers right now. So the fish, the things that we used to catch them on 10 years ago, we have to use some smaller. We're fishing a lot of size 20s and 22s and 5, 6X. They've gotten a little more educated for sure.
All right, so that's awesome. We're going to come back to stillwater fishing, but let's talk about the Provo. So, tell me about the Provo. You mentioned there's 3 sections. What makes each section kind of unique?
Right. So the Provo starts up in the Uinta Mountains. I believe it's Wall Lake. And the north and the south fork of the Provo combine together into the upper Provo. And that is a true freestone stream. So we've got lots of stoneflies, caddisflies. They get a really epic green drake hatch up there. Not as many fish per mile as the tailwaters down below, but we can really occasionally get some gigantic fish, especially if we get lake run fish that come out of Jordanelle Reservoir.
Okay. Is it less crowded up there?
It is. Access is a little more limited. There's a lot of private water, but there are some public points along the highway up to the Uintas where you can pull off and fish a dry dropper, or if there's a good hatch going on, you can target some fish on dries. Really bouldery. It's a really tricky piece of water to navigate. Lots of big rolling bowling ball sized rocks, and makes it a challenge. But beautiful fishery. And what you get on the upper Provo is you get a plethora of different types of trout. You can get the wild browns. You can get Bonneville cutthroats. You can get some rainbows and mountain whitefish. So it's a smorgasbord of fish. I don't know exactly what you do.
Those Bonneville trout, what's the story with Bonneville trout? I know it's just another strain, but how are they? Do you find that they're that much different than, other types of cutthroat?
Yeah, they're really beautiful. They've got this beautiful purple hue on their gill plates. They're one of the native trout of Utah. They've been here since the Ice Age, and they're harder to find than they were in the past, but the upper Provo, parts of the Uintas, and some of the smaller streams in the Uinta Basin have healthy populations of Bonneville cutthroats.
Okay, I'm looking at my Trout Routes app here, one of my sponsors, and you can see, where the public access starts on the upper pretty clearly. It looks like there's quite a bit as you get farther up, isn't there?
There is, yeah, and the road parallels that river, so it's really, you're not hiking through a lot of thick brush and up and down mountains to get to the water, so it makes it pretty easy to access.
What is the story with the big lawsuit in Utah around, what was it, Victory Ranch or something like that?
Yeah, we're still in the middle of it. I may have these facts wrong, but from what I knew is the law before stated that as long as you're in the high water mark, which is essentially 10 feet side of the river, you are not trespassing. But somehow the law got turned over to now the landowner owns halfway out to the river bottom. So just even walking on the river bottom on some of those sections, you're technically trespassing.
Like everywhere in Utah now? That's true everywhere in Utah?
I don't know that. I know sections of like the middle Provo or public access, but we're really kind of dealing with this trespassing issue on the upper stretch of the Provo and now on the lower stretch below Deer Creek.
Gotcha. Huh.
There's a lot of gray area, and I know the Utah Stream Access Coalition has been working to fight for access for fishermen, and so we're still kind of in the middle of that, and but it is definitely a tricky thing to navigate right now, especially when you have clients who are used to fishing certain parts of these rivers that they fished with me for almost 20 years.
Yeah. How much of the lower kind of got wiped out by that?
This all kind of really changed in October, and I'm not going to mention his name, but the landowner on River Right bought the land on River Left. So now he's kind of claiming that, the river bottom is owned all the way across the river. And so we're just trying to be respectful of his land, but also knowing what our rights are as anglers and access to the river.
Well, good luck with that.
Like I said, we're right in the middle of it right now, and I'm hoping that we get it all straightened out so it works for both the landowner and for the people like myself who make our livelihood on these fish.
Right. Huge news, folks. The #1 fishing app, and I'm talking Trout Routes here, has been updated to include the entire lower 48. That's 50,000 streams mapped and classified into 4 categories and 350,000 hand-curated public access points marked and ready for you to explore. You know, there's nothing more exciting than finding that new trout stream or access point. I'm a huge fan of Trout Routes because they make it so easy. Say goodbye to stumbling around country roads looking for your next spot, because Trout Routes provides every detail you need for each stream, including public and private bridges, stream flows, trail access, where to park, camping opportunities, boat ramps, and more. No service, no problem. You can save maps for offline use. With Trout Routes, I've found dozens of new streams and access points I never would have known about. So what are you waiting for? Sign up for Trout Routes today on your Apple or Android phone. Hey anglers, you've heard me talking about Angler's Coffee for quite some time now, and I have a question for you. Have you tasted it yet? Well, if you have, then you know what I'm talking about. It's darn good coffee, isn't it? Hey, if you're like me, tasting's believing, and believe me, this coffee tastes great. My wife and I are hooked on it. Angler's Coffee offers an impressive spectrum of flavor profiles, so there's something for everyone. You know, when you're spending a day on the water, you need a great cup of coffee to carry you through, like the Coachman's Blend. Named after the famous Royal Coachman, you'll love the design of the bag as much as the coffee. This blend of medium and dark roasted coffee from Central and South America produces a flavorful and smooth cup with notes of chocolate and baking spices and a smooth finish. Order some today and save 10% with a custom subscription like I did. You pick the coffee blends you want, and they're delivered right to your doorstep. And if you're not 100% satisfied, they'll give you your money back, no questions asked. No kidding. A percentage of each sale goes to some great nonprofit organizations in the fly fishing community. So put a smile on your face, just like I did, and give it a cast. That's Angler's Coffee. Tasting's believing. All right, so back to kind of the sections of the Provo. So that's the upper, lots of different types of fish. How about, yeah.
So like I said, the North Fork and the South Fork combined for the upper, and that runs for a few miles and then dumps into Jordanelle Reservoir. And then we start our first true tailwater fishery below Jordanelle, which is the Middle Provo. And that's pretty much public access for the 14 miles before that dumps into Deer Creek Reservoir. There's a number of parking lots along the river where the state has put some access points and makes it really easy to fish.
Very good. What's the water like through there?
It's I would call it a small to medium sized stream. It's not really big enough for a drift boat. You can probably put a fly craft through there. You probably get a couple of grumpy fishermen, but most of the people who fish the Middle Provo walk and wade it.
Okay.
And it's a lot of medium to large boulders and rocks, and your classic run, riffle, pool, and tail out into another run, pool, tail out. So you can target fish in the head of the hole, the middle of the hole, the tail out. And when a hatch goes off, it's an amazing. It really makes you know how many fish are in a hole when like a green drake hatch comes off, or a midge hatch in the middle of January when the snow's flying. You've got just hundreds of these heads on top feeding, and pretty mind blowing.
That's pretty cool. That's kind of fun to get out there and see that. That's for sure. Okay, and what about the lower?
So the lower, I would call the lower almost a completely different river than the Middle Provo. And I think where it really changes is when that Middle Provo dumps into Deer Creek Reservoir, there's a ton of limestone cliffs on that lake. And I believe that all that limestone in Deer Creek Reservoir changes the chemical makeup of that water. And so when that water comes out of Deer Creek Dam, it's like a completely different river. You have this more sandy bottom, a little more weed growth, not as many big rocks, and your population of aquatic crustaceans are incredible. So the main food source for those fish on the lower Provo are sow bugs. And so It's kind of like an all-you-can-eat shrimp buffet for these fish. They just fatten up, and just amazing. growth rates on these fish.
That's awesome. And then what's the, what's sort of the fish profile through the middle and the lower then? Because you were telling me earlier it kind of changes.
It does. So the middle Provo, predominantly you're going to find wild brown trout that probably these days average 11, 12 to 15, 16 inches. We'll get some nice 18, 20 inches. And one of my guides last year guided someone into a 35.5-inch brown on a size 20 little chartreuse caddis nymph.
Really?
On the middle.
Wow.
Yep, about a mile below the dam.
Whew.
So we estimated that, and I'll put that in the show notes, a picture of it, but we estimated it was 13, 14 pounds.
That's huge.
So there's potential for some giants for sure on both stretches.
Yeah, I'll say.
But every big hole on the Provo's got a fishable lifetime. You just gotta get them when they're feeding. And some guys that will mouse fish it at night. And I know of a few guys from some of the local fly shops who have caught some gigantic trout on mouse patterns during full moon, and
sure,
pretty exciting.
Okay, and what about the lower? What's the difference between the middle and the lower in terms of the fish profile?
Yeah, so like I was saying, the middle Provo has predominantly wild brown trout with some mountain whitefish mixed in. Occasionally we'll get a rainbow trout from Deer Creek Reservoir that will migrate up into the middle Provo, but you're mostly looking at wild brown trout on the middle Provo. When you get onto the lower Provo, you're looking, I would say, 60% wild brown trout and 30 to 40% wild rainbow trout. And the rainbows on this stretch of the river there's some of the prettiest rainbow trout I've ever seen. And a lot of rainbow trout that I've used as references for my paintings have come from the lower Provo. They're the perfect, beautiful rainbow trout, big red stripe, incredible colors on their gill plates. Just an amazing fish on that river. And they fight like they're steelhead. Though a 16-inch rainbow on the lower Provo will rip you, 50 yards downstream, cartwheeling the whole way.
Real? Oh my God! You might get into your backing on a 16-incher, huh?
Yeah, we've had many clients get into the backing. They'll hit and take the current and hold on.
Yeah, it's a rare fish for me that takes me to my backing. I mean, I think kind of one hand the number of fish I've caught, trout, that have done that.
Yep. Well, especially when the water's high, even a 16-inch rainbow, they'll get into the current and just gotta hold on.
Yeah, and if you're waiting, it's like, okay, that fish might be gone.
That fish might be gone.
You can start running, but you might run out of real estate. So.
Yep, I hurt yourself trying
right.
to run downstream.
But there's nothing more fun than chasing a trout on the end of a fly. You know what I mean? You're running downstream, trying not to trip. That actually is one of my favorite things to do. So.
Me too. And also having, looking at a client with that fish and kind of looking at me like, what do I do?
Yeah, right. Well, get going, run.
Don't handle the reel and, keep your rod bent to the side and, we'll get this fish in and when we do, it's amazing.
With so much information out there, it can get darn right confusing and even overwhelming to find the right fishing adventure. Sorting through all the options and fees can be quite the headache. Well, not anymore. I'm super excited to introduce Got Fishing. Got Fishing is a boutique booking agency for world-class fishing adventures around the world. They ensure that you are on the exact fishing trip that meets your skill level, budget, and desired experience. Whether you're a seasoned angler or new to the sport, Got Fishing's personalized service will help you decide which adventure is the best fit for you, your group, or even your business. Worried about fees? Worry no more. With Got Fishing, you won't pay anything extra because their services are entirely free for you. You see, Got Fishing exclusively partners with highly reputable outfitters who gladly compensate them for their services, ensuring a win-win situation. Explore the range of fishing adventures and learn more about the services Got Fishing provides at gotfishing.com. That's www.gotfishing.com. And check them out on Instagram, too. what are your thoughts on fighting and landing big fish? Like, what do you tell a client all of a sudden hooks into something really huge? Like, how are you coaching that person?
Yeah, I just try to first I try to relax them a little bit, because if they get too tight, they'll just lock up and snap the fish off. But I really try to instruct clients to actually use the rod to fight the fish. So, putting the rod to the side and trying to turn their head out of the current. Because if I can get them to turn that head out of the current, and we get into the slower part of the eddy, and then get their arms over their head and get that fish's head up, up out of the water, I can head on them. And so we're trying to also not let them fight them for 20 minutes. We want to make sure that
right.
that fish is nice and strong, and it doesn't have too much lactic acid buildup. And
Sure.
so
they survive. The angle of the rod is super important. Is that right? And
yeah. So,
okay.
yeah, we try not to have them with the pressure straight on the fish, because if they got that rod straight up and almost pointing at the fish, there's just too much pressure on that little fly, and most of the time it'll snap off 5-6x tippet. So when we put the rod to the side, it alleviates some of that direct pressure, and also it teaches them how to use the rod to fight the fish, and make the fight shorter, so that the fish is healthy and they can take a nice picture.
What's the difference though? If I got the same bend in the rod and it's over my head, and I got the same bend in the rod and it's to the left or the right of me, what's the difference? Aren't you putting the same amount of pressure on that fly and that tippet either way? Or
Yeah. We try to get them to put the rod over their head just before we get the net under them. So we're trying to, get that fish closer to the surface, because if they got the rod close to their body, and that fish is still 2, 3, 4 feet under the water, and we can't get the net under them. But if we can get them to raise that rod over their head, get their head up, then we can get that net under them, and high five, and fist pump, and woohoo.
right,
Right.
So what's your personal best there on the Provo? I mean, your buddy got a 35 incher. What'd you get? 37?
My personal best is probably 24, but my wife caught one when we were fishing a few years ago that we taped at 26.5 on the lower Provo.
Your wife did. How about that?
She tends to catch the biggest fish anywhere we go, and she's like, I'm gonna go make a drink. I'll see you later. So it's kind of like dropping the mic. That's why.
Like, I just got my one fish I need.
And when she had that big rainbow on, she hooked it on a size 16 sow bug nymph, and I'm freaking out. I'm like, okay, you got to do this. And she's just like, let me do my thing. She
chill
was
out somewhere.
Cool as a cucumber, and just totally was and I was like, oh my gosh. And
it was a rainbow?
Yeah, it was a rainbow. It was actually on the front of my brochure for a number of years.
Okay.
And it was a pretty incredible fish, for sure.
Tell me about the hookup. Like, how did it happen? What was she doing?
I just had her at the head of this pool, just below the dam below Deer Creek on the lower.
Yeah.
And it was early May. There wasn't a lot hatching that day, and so I rigged up a little sow bug and probably a little mayfly nymph for her, and she's fished with me ever since we were dating, so she's got her technique down really well, and she just made a nice cast up in the riffle, a couple men, set the hook, and that thing just raced upstream, and it porpoised, and I just kind of put my hands over my mouth, and she just kind of looked at me like, leave me alone, let me focus. And she was really calm and got that fish. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I was speechless. It was
pretty good for you. That's fun that you were there and you got a picture of this, huh?
Oh yeah, so like I said, the picture of her with that giant rainbow was the front of our fly fishing brochure for about years.
As it should be. That's pretty cool. Talk about the hatch chart and just the bug activity, and is it different in the different sections? I'm assuming it is, but kind of walk us through the seasons as far as the hatch chart.
Well, just with starting with the Upper Provo, like I said, being that it's a freestone stream, you're going to get in the springtime, you'll get some mayflies, like some March Browns and some blueing olives. And then in late spring, you'll get very prolific caddis hatches. You'll also get a really nice green drake hatch in second or third week of June. But it's a little more limited because being that it's a freestone stream, there's not quite as many bugs that hatch like we do on the middle and the lower Provo. So on the middle Provo, starting in the spring, we'll have our midge hatches. Those will go into bluing olive hatches, and those bluing olives are a little bigger, so we'll get some 18s and 16s. And that will go into our Mother's Day caddis hatch, which is almost like icing on cake. When those caddis, they're crawling all over your ears and they're coating the river like like I said, icing on cake. And then that will transition into pale morning duns.
About when's that? What time of year is that, Walter?
So pale morning duns will start hatching mid-June.
Okay.
And then right when the pale morning duns are hatching, we'll start to get our infamous green drake hatch. And generally, the green drakes start popping first week of July, sometimes the end of June, but the first 2 weeks of July are when those green drakes, and that's kind of like we don't have a salmon fly hatch, but that's our big hatch on the river. That's
what size are those guys?
They can be size 8s, 10s, 12s, and every fish in that river gets done for a couple weeks because it's
awesome.
such a big source.
Do you find that's true? Like in those big hatches, these fish start to gorge themselves. What do you see happening? Do you see that they kind of get a little quiet?
Yeah, the first couple weeks they will just you can throw anything that resembles a green drake and they'll come up with a bandit and just hammer them. And then as a couple weeks go on, they get a little more keen, and the profile of your green drake fly has to be a little slimmer, and your presentations have to be a little better. They catch on to the game pretty quickly, but the first weeks it's amazing. But yeah, you'll get a period of time in the day where they're probably pretty full, and there'll be big green drakes floating by and nothing happening. And
yeah, what do you do then? Like if you're out with clients and you're in that phase of the hatch, what do you do to get clients on fish?
For some reason, these fish always will eat a small sow bug or a midge. So if they're not keyed into those big drakes, we may go back to a little inline nymph rig and put some small flies on, and those fish will always eat a size 20 midge or size 18 sow bug.
So you go the opposite then. You go like instead of throwing a cheeseburger at them, you throw a potato chip.
Yep, something a little less threatening for sure.
Oh, interesting.
So we get that green drake hatch, and then our pale morning duns, they'll last all the way through August. We'll get some really nice evening caddis hatches. And come fall time, we start transitioning back into bluing olives. And these bluing olives are much smaller. You will get them 20s, 22s, 24s.
Oh, wow.
But it's a really neat time of year when we got some nice foliage and beautiful bluing olive hatch and noses everywhere. It's quite a place. And then come into the wintertime, we're back to midges. Really like mid-January into February, we'll get some really, really heavy midge hatches. And we have this midge called a buffalo. We call it the buffalo midge. And it's a bigger one. It can get 16, 18, and it's amazing. I'll have clients that are skiing at the resorts, and then the next day they'll come on the river and we'll chase rising fish with bald eagles and snow-capped peaks, and they can rest their
ski legs.
Yeah, some cold water immersion on the river. It's pretty cool. And we don't have it in Utah for our streams, so it's 12 months a year, 24/7. And
okay,
there's certain times in the winter time, especially in March, February, I'm still guiding 4, 5, 6 times a week.
Oh, no kidding. Yeah, good for you.
Yeah.
Let's switch gears and talk a little bit about lakes, because I know you've been doing quite a bit of lake fishing, stillwater fishing the last couple of years. Why is that? Why have you sort of keyed in on that?
Well, this area of Utah, Park City area, Heber Valley, it's really been put on the map, especially during COVID. There's a lot of people that come and visit, and there's a lot more river users. So for me, I like to find places where I have a little more solitude. And I've got a lot of clients who remember the days when we would go on the Provo and certain places and maybe see one or two other anglers. And these days that's a little harder to find. So I've been exploring all the lakes and reservoirs, especially connected to the Provo and the Weaver, that I've driven past for many years, watching fish rise as I'm driving by.
Yeah.
And I kind of neglected them because I didn't really know how to fish them. And this all ties back to Pyramid Lake. So since I've been fishing Pyramid Lake the last 4 or 5 years, all those techniques that I've learned on Pyramid Lake, I've applied to our local reservoirs and lakes with really, really good success.
Oh, no kidding.
And I've been watching a lot of videos of Phil Rowley and Brian Chan. Those are my two mentors online that I've learned a lot of techniques with stillwater. And the other thing is a lot of these clients that I have are getting older, and it's hard for them to navigate the rivers like they used to. So they get on the boat, and we can fire up the motor and get into a nice bay. And whether we're fishing an indicator rig or we got fish rising, it's just a really relaxing way to fish and catch some big fish, not have a lot of people around. So a lot of clients have really appreciated just this little change of pace in the spring and the fall to get out on some still water. And now that I've got my technique sharpened, we're catching some really big fish at some of these reservoir lakes around here.
Can you share a little bit about, what those techniques are on the lakes there in Utah?
Yeah, so typically our most productive rig is with an indicator. So we're fishing an indicator anywhere from 6.5 to 10 feet below the flies. Generally, I always have a balance leech on. For some reason, fish just cannot resist a balance leech.
Yeah.
I never get that thing off. I'll rotate the chirominid and scud or a little damsel flying nymph, but pretty much all the time the dark balance leech is always on there, and it always produces really nice fish.
And how are you fishing that? What's your technique for that? It sounds like you were stripping it on Lahontan.
So with the indicator rig, typically I'll just have the client do a really big roll cast or just a big open loops so they don't tangle. The rig has a lot of hinge points, so there's a swivel and tag ends. And if they're trying to cast it with tight loops, it will turn into really quick. So we'll do like a water load. So I'll teach them how to water load and do a big open. And generally with the indicator rig, we'll just cast it out and we'll just let it sit. And as I say, we'll let it marinate, sit there for a while. Sometimes these fish will hit it as it's sinking. And then after 30, 45 seconds, I'll have them do a slow strip and then stop. And a lot of times just that little strip, whether that leech is being elevated a little bit or that little chirominid, that will usually produce a strike. And sometimes that indicator, sometimes it'll go 2 feet, 2, 3 feet under the water and there's no mistake.
Oh, is that right?
That sometimes that indicator will just turn or do something a little weird and I'll just say set. And so they can be really picky and cautious even on the still water. But it's really, from what I've learned over the last 2 years, some of these fish that we catch off the boat are really trophy size. I had a client last fall get a 28-inch tiger trout out of a small lake in the Uinta Basin. And
wow.
Man, what a fight. Thing ate a size 18 chirominid And when he set the hook, he said, "I set on a log." And so I grabbed the rod, and that thing shot 20, 30 feet deeper. I'm like, nope, that's a fish. Here you
Yeah.
go.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
You were telling me a couple of weeks ago about a pretty good sized fish you caught that was kind of unique. Something about a fish T-boning another fish.
Oh, well, this is actually going back to a long time ago. So this is probably 2009, 2010. I was guiding a couple of my longtime clients on the Weber River, which is another wonderful little tailwater about 20 minutes east of Park City. And so we were on this stretch. It was, we had some good caddis hatches, and before the caddis hatch, I had a couple caddis nymphs on, and my client was at the head of this pool. I actually had him on a bounce rig, which is where the weights are on the bottom, two flies up above. It's kind of a drop shot rig with a strike indicator, very effective for a lot of these fisheries. And typically, when clients hook the bottom, I'll go up and grab the rod so that they don't break the whole rig off. And so he said he'd hooked this little 9-10 inch trout, and then it wrapped up along the bottom. So I walked upstream, grabbed his rod, and I'm just trying to get his snag out. And that snag moved about 3 feet out into the current. And I was like,
Yeah.
So I handed back the rod. I'm like, yeah, that's not a snag. I don't know what we have, but here you go, and we'll see what happens. And his girlfriend happens to be this professional photographer. She's done photography for National Geographic and a whole bunch of big places. So she had this really amazing Canon camera on her. So she gets up on the bank, and she's just taking pictures of us, me trying to instruct him how to fight this thing. And I had him lift up his arms just to try to get this fish up a little bit. And she captured, and I put it in the show notes, this 27, 28-inch brown that had T-boned the 8 or 9-inch fish that was on the end of his line.
Oh my gosh.
So the crazy thing is we actually landed both of the fish, never hooking that giant brown.
Oh, he didn't let go?
He wouldn't let go.
Really? They almost always let go. That's amazing.
Yeah, I know, right? So that fish did not let go until I got the net under it. And of course, the smaller fish was like sashimi.
Yeah, mangled.
In all the years that I've been guiding, that was probably the craziest moment. Just the fact that fish wouldn't let go, and that she got this photo of this brown with this other brown sideways in its mouth. I actually posted it years ago, and it went viral. I mean, people all over the world were posting that. And the really cool thing is this, as these clients knew that I was getting into the artwork, it was 7, 8 years after this experience, they had me go and paint that. So it was just really cool to relive that as I'm working on that fish, on that commission for them, and all those crazy moments, and that we actually landed that fish without actually hooking it.
That's amazing. And
yeah,
I wonder if in a lifetime, how many times that's going to happen. Probably once if you're lucky.
Yeah, because occasionally we'll have, on the Provo and the Weaver, we'll have giant fish snip at smaller, pulling them in, and occasionally onto something. But as soon as they feel that pressure of you trying to pull them along, they usually instantly let go. But for some reason, that big old brown he wanted that
determined bugger. It's hungry, man. Well, I want to get into your artwork a little bit in a minute, but first, I'd love to just hear a little bit about your story, because you grew up in Vermont.
I did.
Fishing some small streams, and then you were dying to get a job with Orvis since it was just 20 minutes down the road. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I had always been fishing as a kid. I would dig up worms and night crawlers in my mom's garden. we're fortunate enough to have this beautiful brook trout stream right across the road from my house. So I just, as young as I can remember it, I was just fascinated by fishing and catching fish. And my neighbor had a couple of old rods in his barn, and I think I was doing some chores for him, and in return he gave me one of these old fly rods.
Nice.
And I took it up to a little beaver pond close to my house and bought a few dry flies at the local hardware store. And I caught this beautiful brook trout on a Royal Coachman when I was probably 13,
That's
14.
cool.
And it was just this instant, like,
Yeah.
this is what I want to do. It was no one really got me into fly fishing. I'd always loved to fish. And then once I had that experience of watching that brook trout come and hit that dry fly, that's all I wanted to do. So I soaked up every book I could. And luckily, when I was about 16, 17, I did land this job at Orbis, but it took a few tries. I went in every week or 2 weeks and would talk to the manager and talk to the gentleman who was running the fly fishing schools.
Yeah.
And I think after 4, 5, 6 times, they knew that I would not take no for an answer.
You were going away.
Yeah. So finally, I got that job, and I was a junior in high school when I started there, but they didn't put me in any kind of fishing situation right away. I had to fold a lot of cardigan sweaters and work in the clothing department and learn that. And then about 6, 8 months of working clothing, I think a guy who was supposed to be in the fishing department didn't show up one day, and they put me in there. And so I started in the retail. I was fortunate enough to work with some incredible people that just had so much wealth of information when it came to fly tying and fishing. And I just soaked it up like a sponge. And the following year, I started working as a fly casting instructor at the Orbis schools.
Wow, cool.
And I think when that started happening, I knew that was my calling.
That was your calling.
It ruined me after.
You must have been a pretty good fly caster to be teaching at Orvis's headquarters.
Yeah, I worked with a lot of people from the store and schools, and a lot of times when I get off from the retail, some of those gentlemen that I used to work with would just teach me the fundamentals, and so I picked everything up fairly quickly. And yeah, it was just really nice to be surrounded by so many experts and professionals, and kind of having them take me under their wing. And
that's cool. You met Joe Humphreys along the way here too, didn't you?
I did. He was the first year that I was there. We had this Orvis Days at the store in Manchester, and he was doing a fly tying seminar there. And so he showed me how to tie a peacock soft hackle, I believe it was.
There you go.
Yeah, that was the start of it. And from there, I just started tying all my own flies. And how I kind of got into the guiding is some of the students from the schools would want to go out after the classes. And so I started taking some of the students on the stretches of the Bat and Kill just outside of Manchester.
Yeah.
And my first guide trips, my first guiding experiences were on the Bat and Kill, which is notoriously difficult. And you can sit there all day and have small brook trout and brown trout refuse everything you throw at them. But it was a good experience. It kind of cut my teeth for fishing, technical fishery.
How'd you end up out west?
Yeah, so well, I did a lot of ski racing growing up, so that got me familiar with the Park City area. And when I was working with Orvis through college, they sent me out to Jackson Hole to work a couple seasons out there. And so between working there and skiing in Utah, I definitely had this pull to come out west. So the skiing's kind of what brought me out, and the fly fishing is what definitely made me stay and want to live out here.
Kind of kept you out there. Yeah, very good. And so, folks, Walter is an incredible artist. You can go online and look at his artwork. What's the website, Walter? Because I'd love for you to talk about your artwork.
Yeah, there's a link on my Trout Tales website. So it's Trout Tales, and Tales is Tales, like telling a tale, .com. And there's an Etsy link, and that Etsy link is Etsy/shop/FineFinArt.
FineFin Art. Okay.
In art, yeah.
Yeah. How did you get into art? Did you know when you were a little kid that, this was something you were interested in, or how'd that happen?
So yeah, just like the fishing, I've been drawing fish since I was 6-7 years old. I'd take old articles of outdoor life or fur fishing game and just take my pencils and sketch the fish in those magazines. And I still have a bunch of old sketchbooks from the mid 80s and early 80s of
cool.
these trout that I used to sketch. But I put it away for many years. I all through high school and part of college, I did a lot of art. And then I got busy with life and school and put it away. And it all really kind of started with a fishing client. I had a client who caught this like 25, 26-inch brown. And he was thinking about getting a mount of it, but then he wanted to do a painting. So I actually found an artist for him to do this commission. And at that same time, I had also started playing with colored pencils and getting back into the artwork myself. And so we got the painting back, and it was beautiful, but it really didn't look like the fish he caught. And I said, let me take this, and I've been playing with these colored pencils, and let me see what I can do. And I gave it to him for free, and he kind of was a little mad. He kind of like grabbed me. He was like, Walter, you need to start doing this. He's like, I would have commissioned you because this looks like my fish. And so it was really this client who kind of got this fire in my belly. And so that started about 2012, 2013. And I've just, now what I do is I have my busy guide season, and then come fall, winter into early spring, I'm in the studio. These days I'm doing a lot of painting, big canvas with acrylics, and I still do some color pencil work as well. But I'm kind of turning this little side hustle into a second business, and it's all tied in with the fly fishing. So it's I call it full circle. So
yeah, right.
You can get the experience where I'll tie the fly, guide you into the fish, and if it's that fish of a lifetime, we get a good picture of it. I'll paint it. So every aspect of that experience, my client and myself tied to.
That's super cool. Yeah, I don't think you're the only guy I've talked to who does all that. That is really cool.
The thing is, too, so my work is very detailed. So
you're doing very large pieces too, aren't you?
Mm-hmm, I am. But like if I do a commission piece for a client, I'm, the spot pattern on a fish is like our fingerprint. No two trout are marked the same. So when I'm doing a commission for a client or for someone who's found me online, I'm studying the spot pattern and every marking on that fish and capturing that. So as a result, some of my pieces take over 100 hours to complete.
Oh, wow.
That's where like my scientific brain and my art brain mix and definitely unique style. But when I present that painting to a client, I want them to know, hey, this is your fish. These are where the spots are. So I'll go in and I'll sketch out the image and then study from a photo, like exactly how that fish is marked before I start filling in with colored pencil or with acrylic paint.
And do you grid it out so that you can get those spots kind of located on a grid, or do you just freehand it?
Well, yeah, sometimes I'll use a protractor and I'll measure between spots, or I'll kind of map it out with pencil. Because for me, it's like I just want I want that fish to be that fish that they caught, and so I really just enjoy the detail work, and I think any artist should use trout as a subject because just colorations, the spots, the pattern. I mean, it's even like within a brown trout, there are so many different variations. Some of them can be pumpkin orange, some of them can be yellow, light yellow, and some have red spots, some of them have big black spots. This It's just a whole variation within different types of trout that just fascinates me. It's amazing. And I love brook trout. Brook trout are kind of my first love. So anytime I get to paint a brook trout, I just love it. I love those blue halos and that red belly and the vermiculation on top of the brook trout. And that's kind of my first love. So anytime I get a chance to paint one of those, I get really excited.
So the trout, you try to represent exactly what you see in the photo on the trout. Do you embellish anything, like the backgrounds? Do you change things up, or you just do what's in the photo?
Sure. Yeah. So I did this brook trout for a client where the brook trout was laying on his arm. And so I took the idea of that brook trout on his arm, and then I put a rock background and a net in there. So I'll take 4 or 5 different images as references to use.
Yeah, cool.
I'll kind of put them all together to make one scene. And I've done a few paintings where I've always wanted to do like a really nice landscape with an underwater scene. So I've got a nice landscape of the high country, alpine high country, with cutthroat trout under the water. And so I've used a few items, kind of molded them all together. And the trick is to make that look like it's supposed to be a natural scene. And that's where the challenge is. And I will tell you, I always do a background on my pieces, but the background is the hardest part. I'm very confident knowing that I can nail that trout, whether I'm painting or drawing it. But when it comes to trying to mimic water or wet rocks or wet reflections on those fish, it is daunting.
Yeah, no, you're good at it though. Let me tell you, I agree, that is tough to do.
And generally the backgrounds take twice as long as the fish.
Really? No kidding. That's okay.
A lot of times I'm painting, it's not working, and so I'll paint over it, or draw all over it, or erase it. And water is, I think that's why a lot of people don't paint that, is it's really difficult, because most of the time it doesn't look right. And what I've learned is I just have to keep going, and eventually maybe it's 80% done, and then it will finally all click together and like, oh, it all works now.
Yeah.
But it's definitely hard thing to pull off.
So what inspires you about fly fishing or artwork? What is it that inspires you to do all this?
I think it's in my DNA. I mean, my great grandfather was a fisherman in Norway, and for a short time when I was really, really young, before I lived in Vermont, I lived in New York City. And even as a city kid, I would walk down to Central Park and watch people fish the ponds. And
That's great.
It's always just,
where's the fishing? I'm going there.
Yeah. And the other thing is I had this wonderful trout stream behind my high school in Vermont. And some days I would pack like that 6-piece Orbis rod in my backpack. And at lunchtime, I'd go out and fish. And then I'd come back when the buses would come at 3:00. And that landed me in the principal's office more than once.
Yeah, that's funny. Well, it's better than what some other kids do on their lunch hour. That's for sure.
Right.
We won't go there.
I didn't really grow up with my dad, so there was really no one. I mean, I had a neighbor who took me fishing a lot, but I just have always been drawn to fish and artwork. And it's really kind of a cool thing that the things that I was doing at 8 years old, I've turned into 2 businesses at 40.
Yeah, you're a blessed man. That's pretty cool.
and I love it. And I when I'm on the river guiding, I'm looking at the reflections in the river, every fish that we're catching and releasing, all those spots and colorations, that's all getting stored in my memory bank. So when I get into the studio, I'm just using all that personal experience and throwing it on the canvas or on the paper, and just, that's my life.
In between telling your customers to set,
set or grabbing their forearm and setting the hook for them. I
Yeah.
do
Oh
that
man,
sometimes.
it's always amazing. Like you look away just for a second, and then the guide's yelling at you to set. I looked away for 10 seconds to look at the mountains, and that's right when I miss a strike, and I'm busted. The
Oh,
guide's like
sure.
set. It's
Yeah.
probably a trick to like yelling at your clients all day long and doing it in a nice way.
Well, it's during this busy season. Occasionally, in my sleep, I'll set the hook and wake my wife up because I've smacked her in the arm side of the head because
So you're dream fishing
doing it
too.
all day
Okay.
long, or I'll just be saying set in my sleep.
In your sleep.
So,
That's
yeah.
hilarious. I was going to ask you like what you would be doing if you weren't a guide or an artist, but that's a really dumb question because there's nothing else you'd be doing. You'd be guiding and doing art. That's it.
I think so. I think that, it's. I feel really fortunate that my two real passions in life I'm paying the bills with right now.
Yeah, good for you. All right, let's Provo River question. What is your one big pro tip for visiting anglers coming to the Provo?
Oh, okay. Hire a guide. So I would say that to have the most success on the Provo, you really need to the nymph. If you get a good hatch and the fish are rising, that's great. But to consistently catch fish on this river, a lot of times they're just right on the bottom, eating small nymphs. I'd say if you have like a size 20 midge and a size 18 or 20 mayfly nymph this time of year, you're going to do well. Or if we're like on the lower Provo, I never take off like a size 20 sow bug because they definitely key into those.
Okay.
But really kind of know your nymph game on this river, and don't be afraid to go light tippet. A lot of guys will come. I remember when I used to work for one of the local fly shops, guys would come in and be like, I was fishing size 20s and all this, and I wasn't catching anything. And we would ask, well, what size tippet were you using? And they're like, oh, I was using 3X. Well, too heavy. You have to, these fish are really keen these days. So really pay attention to your tippet size. So even nymphing these days, we're fishing a lot of 5, 6X. And in the winter, when we're catching them on dries, midge fishing, these days we're even going 7X.
Oh, you really?
Oh yeah, these fish they've gotten savvy for sure. No more days of size 6 San Juan worms and size 10 hares there. They're a little more sophisticated these days.
All right. Now I always ask my guests, what's your favorite shore lunch?
Oh, favorite shore? Well,
Yeah.
shore lunch. I don't really have a favorite because I'm more like, let's make a sandwich and get back to fishing. I know some
Okay.
guys will pull out the grills and like try to eat time doing that, but I would get more excited about the meal after fishing than
Yeah.
than
Okay.
the
Well, let's
meal.
talk about that. Where's your favorite place? Like, where would you send some clients that are saying, okay, we want to go get a bite to eat and something to drink? Where would you send them?
Yeah, so if we're on the Provo, the Back 40 restaurant just outside of Heber, they have like one of the best hamburgers in the state of Utah. They've got really nice steaks, salads. They just do a great job. They've got a huge outdoor patio that looks over Mount Timpanogos, which is
Yeah.
part of the Wasatch Front. And so you get these beautiful views. You get really great food. Generally sometimes it comes out in like 5 minutes. I mean, they're fast.
It's good.
It's
Yeah.
just a really good meal. Now, if you're staying in Park City, we've got world-class dining on Main Street. So
Good point.
the restaurant that I used to work at, Chimayo, amazing restaurant, Southwestern. It's got numbers of awards for best dish. I'll just say the London broiled elk. It's got a peppercorn
Oh man, I'll be right over.
seed encrusted elk. Then it's sliced and done with green chili béarnaise, and it's the best steak I've ever had.
That sounds amazing.
It is. So Chimayo, the River Horse on Main Street, and Yukiyama, which is some of the best sushi I've had anywhere. So we really have like amazing. That's the thing about our areas. You can enjoy this these fabulous fisheries, but you can also enjoy like world-class dining, world-class skiing, over 100 miles of mountain bike trails around Park City, and you're 25 minutes from an international airport. And that's what sells the real estate in this area.
For sure. And you've got the Sundance Resort right off the Provo as well, right?
Yeah, that's where I was guiding this morning, just about a mile up from the Sundance. So when my clients were done with me today, they caught a bunch of nice browns and rainbows, and then they just hopped 2 minutes down the road and went up to the Foundry Grill up in Sundance and had
That's a really cool place.
It is, yeah. The scenery, the mountains.
Yeah, I've been in there.
There in the village, and they got some wonderful restaurants, and they got a nice little fly shop right there in the village, and beautiful creek flowing out right through the village there. It's really neat.
And wasn't Jeremiah Johnson the movies, one of my favorite movies? Wasn't that filmed all up in Robert Redford's property up there?
Yeah, I believe so. There and Butch Cassidy. So
really?
Redford had his horse ranch up above the resort for a lot of years. I believe he sold it 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay.
But he resided here. I waited on him a couple times at Chimayo, and I'll tell you this really quick story.
Sure.
This is pretty spontaneous. It was during Sundance, and we had these big parties in at the restaurant, and Redford was part of this big party downstairs, and I was waiting on him, and I just kind of told him really quick, like, hey, I'm a fly fishing guide, and I want to let you know that your movie has influenced my whole life. And
wow.
The really neat thing about Redford is all these other movie executives are trying to get his attention, and he snapped at this one, like, listen, I'm talking to Walter about fly fishing. I'll get with you later.
Oh, really?
So he kind of
is that right?
He kind of cleared the air for me, because he was just really fascinated about, my story of being a fly fishing guide in this area, and how his movie basically.
You mean the movie River Runs Through It? The movie?
Yeah, it created this fly fishing industry that we all enjoy.
Absolutely.
And so it was one of those moments where I'm like, wow, I'm really, this guy who's this high profile movie star is really really wants to know the story behind.
He wanted to hear the story.
Yeah. So
how cool is that?
I just always admired ever since that experience, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I actually just interviewed Norman McLean's son, John McLean, who's an author, and that I'm going to do too. He's going to be my show 100. And he was fascinating. I mean, the whole backstory of The River Runs Through It and what it was like growing up, in Chicago and out there in Montana, and stories about his dad and his uncle that he never met. He never met Paul. Didn't know him at all. He was too young.
Wow.
Well, listen, thank you, Walter, for being on the show. Great job.
Oh, thank you. It's been fun to dig up some old memories, and I appreciate your time.
Oh, you too, for sure. Well, how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, they can go to my website, trouttales.com, TALES.
Okay.
Or you can reach me on social media at Trout Tales, or if they want to inquire about artwork, at Fine Fin Art.
At Fine Fin Art. Okay, there you go. Well, give Walter a shout, folks, if you're interested in a trip or some of his artwork. I tell you, it is absolutely beautiful stuff, and he's got prints for sale, and of course, you can do a commission piece too. Walter, I wish you extraordinary success in all your adventures to follow. And folks, thank you so much for listening to another episode of The Destination Angler. We'll be sure to post Walter's info on our Destination Angler website, and pictures of his top fly pics and some wonderful scenery shots on our Facebook and Instagram pages. You can email me or DM me with comments and suggestions at shag50@gmail.com. And if you like the show, please share it with a buddy. That's how we grow. As always, our music is by our Brothers Fountain, a cool band out of Colorado. Hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll see you again soon. Tight lines, everybody.
Well, I'll go from the land to the shining sea. But I know there's more to life than what the eye can see.